Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning. Welcome, everybody.
This is the EV portion of our show, and in an hour at 11 o'clock, we'll be switching over to the Tesla Roadster podcast. But in the meantime, we're going to cover broad issues that are happening in the world of electric vehicles.
Well, and there are sure a bunch of them today, aren't there?
There are. Here's a headline. Elon Musk apologizes to laid off Tesla employees for major mistake. It turns out that he apologized to his staff after they laid off 14,000 employees and about a 10% reduction in workforce. And he also emailed his staff apologizing for the quality of the severance packages that were sent out to outgoing employees. And this is according to CNBC.
Yeah, it sounds like Elon is, he wanted to give the employees some sort of a fair severance when he laid them off, knowing full well that this is going to be disruptive. This is a hard thing for people to have to deal with. And then somewhere along the lines, the communication didn't make its way out. And so people were paid less on severance than what he expected to have them pay.
He has been quoted as saying, "As we reorganize Tesla, it has come to my attention that some severance packages are incorrectly low." And he wrote in an email, which was seen by CNBC, "My apologies for this mistake. It is being corrected immediately." This was on April 14th. Musk sent an email to the Tesla staff members informing them that the job reductions are the result of the company's rapid growth and that it was a difficult decision to make after the company conducted a thorough review of the organization. He was also quoted as saying, "Over the years, we have grown rapidly with multiple factories scaling around the globe. And with rapid growth, there has been a duplication of roles and job functions in certain areas." So that makes sense.
It does make sense. This is a type of thing that happens in any company that grows quickly. You end up getting bloat, you end up having inefficient processes. As the processes get more efficient over time, pretty soon you have redundant people, and they're being employed because they've been employed, not because they have a particular job.
Right. And of course, it's always the first attempt is to find lateral positions to move people into. If once you recognize that you
That's
have
right.
some duplication of functions.
Yes, that's right.
And then the last resort is doing what the shareholders would expect, which is cutting that cost if it's truly duplicate and superfluous.
Well, and it's not a secret at all. The environment for EVs as a whole, for EV companies as a whole, is a little more challenging right now than it's been in several years.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let's see if there's anything else here. Yeah, he was saying that the issue is like the company's going to go bankrupt. Well, he was talking about X at this point. He had moved in, or this article at least, addressed both. But we don't anticipate that Tesla is anywhere near bankruptcy. In fact, the market seems to be responding positively to these kinds of cuts.
Yeah, correct. I mean, the ideal for a company is first keep your staff, reposition them to a spot where they could be more productive. When you can't do that, then you cut the staff that you have to cut so that the rest of the people have a job.
Mm-hmm.
If you wait too long, you may end up in a situation like he was threatening might happen to X. The company goes bankrupt, and then nobody has a job.
Right. Yep. So here's another thing. The elimination of the Supercharger team, laying off all of those people. There was a recent Twitter X post by Elon, and where he says, "Just to reiterate, Tesla will spend over $500 million expanding our supercharger network to create thousands of new chargers this year." And that's just on new site expansions, not counting operations costs, which are much higher.
Yeah, and I've actually seen that he's putting actions behind those words already.
Mm-hmm.
Overnight, it broke out in the press that Elon has started rehiring some key people from the supercharger team that he had laid off. The chief among them is Max de Zager. He was the director of charging for North America, and currently is, based on assuming his position is the same, he's currently the top dog on that particular team. It does sound like Elon's making good on these comments, and he realizes that it's going to take some effort to keep everything rolling forward with the chargers.
Mm-hmm. You know, we did a video a couple, 3 years ago or so about the supercharger network, and we ran some numbers. We all knew, let me back way up. In order for Tesla to sell their electric vehicles, they knew they needed to develop a robust charging system. With the Tesla Roadster, for example, there was nothing in place. So when you took a trip somewhere, you actually had to drive this thing to a KOA campground or someplace where you could get 240 volts to,
Right.
make it in a reasonable amount of time. If you were using your 120 volt charge cable, which would plug into any universal outlet, it would take you over 30 hours to get a full charge. That certainly cramps your style when you're on vacation and trying to, sightsee. So the only way to get a decent charge was to go to a 240 volt source. Well, in order for Tesla to become viable and to sell transportation vehicles, they knew they needed a robust charging system. So that's where these chargers began to come from, the destination chargers. And the businesses quickly picked up on that, in that they realized that if they put a destination charger in place, the hotels, for example, they're going to attract the EV clientele, which at that time were usually well-heeled because they were able to afford that $150,000 Model S
Right.
back in the day, right?
Right.
And then, of course, later on, they decided, we really need a faster method for people that are commuting or on vacation or going cross-country. And that's when the DC fast charging concept began to really become important to them, and the superchargers evolved from that. So the whole supercharger or the charging system was vital to the evolution of Tesla.
It absolutely was, and boy, that video dates us because that's from a long time ago. When we did that video, if I remember right, there was no such thing as paid supercharging yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So we ran some numbers. What does it cost per kilowatt hour in various parts of the country? And, how does Tesla fund this? Remember, the original Tesla vehicles that were sold with free supercharging, which, of course, is an expense that somehow needs to be reconciled. We all knew that it was temporary. I mean, you can't, it's like the ICE, the auto manufacturers making ICE vehicles, they're not going to give you a free pass to gasoline type stations, for the life of that car, because there's a huge cost attached to that. And sure enough, by 2016 or so, Tesla stopped the free supercharging and started to charge for that.
Yeah, and the benefit, the competitive advantage that Tesla gained by being the first to build a supercharger network and by taking the time to build the most reliable supercharger network, which all they cared about was that we need to have something that's quality so that people don't think about, am I going to get a charge when I get there, or is it going to be down?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, by and large, if it's not a Tesla network, people are having those thoughts.
And in the metropolitan areas, we're talking now about the operating costs being much higher than that $500 million that they're going to spend this year to continue the expansion of the charging network. The operating costs, as he points out, are much higher. And what you have there is not only the cost of electricity in various places, which does, some are very expensive, but also the lease costs for the property. Now, granted, if you're out in Wickenburg, you're not going to have a huge expense in terms of the lease space for the property that you put the superchargers on. But the majority of them in the metropolitan areas are in very high rent districts, like the Biltmore here, for example.
Right.
There's one over here to the west of us. Forget the name of that
Yeah,
mall.
it's called Deer Valley Center, and it's a very popular place, and I think it's going to be one of the more premium rent places here
Yeah.
in the valley.
And then we have Scottsdale, Kierland. Those are extremely expensive places to lease. So he makes a good point. It's not just the cost of the chargers or the cost of electricity, but the operating costs, which tend to run much higher.
They do. And, if I remember right, when we were doing that video originally, we talked about, business rates for electricity are somewhere between 15 and 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And they're charging somewhere between 45 and 65 cents per kilowatt hour. So there's some profit to be made. But when you realize, gee, those are not terribly high margins.
Hmm.
And then you have to account for the people to be able to go in and repair the chargers as they go down inevitably, the lease space, the overhead, the capital infrastructure. It's not a short payback time for that.
Hmm.
And of course, you have digging into that profit some 70,000 people or so who own Teslas who still have free supercharging for life, and many of them have now transferred that supercharging to their latest Model 3 or Model Y.
Hmm. So that's a cash drain on top of the operating costs. You had done some research in one of the earlier podcasts regarding the profitability of the competing, EV charging networks or providers.
I had, and I was actually talking to somebody in the industry who says that right now the industry is getting to where it's ripe for a shakeout. It looks like it's probably 2030 or so before everything's going to get to an equilibrium. Right now, the industry in general, whether it's Blink or ChargePoint or Electrify America or any of the other networks that are out there, that industry is simply not making money yet. There's not enough electric vehicle density to pay for all the lease space and all of the capital improvements. And it's not until they get to somewhere in that 25 to 50% of all vehicles between being EVs that they think they'll have enough density to get enough charger usage to pay for itself.
We've got a ways to go.
We definitely do.
Interesting. TikTok, Mr. Scroll is chiming in. He says, love your content. Has a 2015 Model S going strong at 100,000 miles. Wish the supercharging speed could improve.
Mr. Scroll, I agree with you there. And the funny thing is, Tesla has 4 generations of superchargers. This is something that I've learned as I've driven a couple different Model S's. I had a 2012 that I drove for a while, driving a 2017 now. And the older Model S's can use the first generation superchargers, which are up to 75 kilowatts per hour charge as a maximum speed. Even as recently as as far back as 2017, second generation chargers could do up to 150 kilowatts per hour.
Mm-hmm.
Third generation chargers starting around 2020 or so, and third generation cars, it's not just the chargers, can do 250 kilowatts per hour, which is roughly 3 times plus the 75 kilowatt per hour speed. So, Mr. Scroll, I feel for you.
So, yeah.
On that supercharging, do you want to talk briefly about Sandy's video? And there was a pretty strong reaction to that one on how it seemed like good business, according to Sandy at the time, to take an already kind of perfected product and keep it that way and not necessarily keep all the R&D people. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, let's remember that Sandy's take on this was a assumption. He was clear that this was not a Tesla position, but it was his take on what he thought was going on behind the scenes. And yeah, from a logical standpoint, it makes sense that if you've developed a technology and it really is not improving tremendously, that the original designers, just basically I guess the architects of that technology are no longer necessary. Now, you would think that in a company as large as Tesla that they would be able to move that kind of talent laterally into other areas. Robotics, for example, I'm sure they need staff there. So his take on it is that was the one of the fundamental reasons for the decline, or for letting those people go, thinning the herd basically, because all that talent was no longer necessary. They had a mature product. So that would be my take on it. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely some logic behind that. I think the reaction in the marketplace of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which there certainly was a lot of FUD factor seems to have had something behind it if Tesla is starting to hire some of these people back.
Yeah.
And the uncertainty, the fear was that Elon overreacted. Not that he shouldn't have laid off anybody, but by laying off everybody, it was putting other projects at jeopardy.
Sure. And your take was maybe there was some intellectual property that was, buried in the heads of people that were let go rather than well documented, and they began to realize they had some vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that is definitely my take. I think that Sandy's logic is sound. Having a large research and development team that continues to research and develop on a product that's actually pretty mature now doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So to me either. So I think his logic was largely sound.
Instagram, Daddy O Weeks chiming in. He says, on YouTube Monroe Live, Sandy's take on the Tesla layoffs was the title. Excellent explanation on the charging team layoffs. Yeah, that's part of what we're talking about currently.
Yeah. Also on TikTok, we have Philip Todd Stewart, who joined us this morning. He was talking about the KOA, Campground of America, at 30 or 50 amp, 110 volt, or 220 volt service for your RVs that became your electric vehicle charger.
Mm-hmm. Yep, temporarily until we got some charging infrastructure.
Now, if I remember right, when we last talked to Raphael the Mystery, he's with ADE Days driving his Roadster around the country. Around the world. He went to a KOA campground here in the United States, and they told him that he was not welcome to charge his Roadster.
Oh, I do recall. It was in Texas, I believe.
Yeah, they did not like that. They said, no, there are chargers out there now. You can charge out there. We don't want you in here to charge in here.
I wonder if the issue is that he was going to be using full capacity versus an EV, which may only draw 10 amps or so, or 15 or 20, depending on what they were doing currently inside.
You have to wonder.
Yeah.
I would think, man, if I go to rent a spot and it has service, then I'm allowed to use that service. That would have been my take.
Right. All right. We've got a picture to throw up here, Jesse. It is, it's a long one. It starts with 438. And it is an image of the comparison between a Tesla 2024 Tesla Model 3 Performance at 53K, 54K with change, and a 2024 Ferrari 12 Cylindri at $400,000 plus. We'll have that image up here shortly. What's pretty remarkable about this image is that visually they look pretty close. Actually, I think that's part of what they're saying in this posting. But we'll get into specs here in a second. It turns out that here we go. The Tesla. They're both red, by the way. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. I did notice that.
And it's not the Ferrari red. It's more of a radiant red, which is, Ferrari has really changed their view on colors. I had a friend here 25 years ago, Ron Roth, with Ron Roth Construction. He had an old 330 Ferrari, ancient thing, not very pretty, kind of homely actually, but it was, of course, highly collectible. So, that was what he drove. It was a 12-cylinder. He ended up, when the Testarossa first came out, deciding that he wanted that car. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the Testarossa, that's the one with the louvers in the doors that, go all the way to the back, basically, into the quarter panels. Very striking car and a clear deviation from the curvy lines that they used to have prior to that.
Sure.
And anyway, he put his money down for one of these cars, and he wanted yellow. He didn't want Ferrari red. And they fought him for a year. And he says, I'm giving you money. I get to decide what color I want. So finally, they caved in. They gave him his yellow Testarossa. He called it. He had a vanity plate called Giallo, which of course is Italian for yellow. But the point here being is Ferrari has begun to migrate into allowing other colors, somewhat cautiously. Sammy Hagar's LaFerrari
Yes.
was the same color as his private jet, kind of a tan color, which you didn't expect on a Ferrari.
Not at all. I would not have expected that at all, but you're right. It was a very unique colored car.
Mm-hmm. So as you can tell here, yeah, they don't look that much different, but let's look at the specs. The Tesla has 510 horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. The Ferrari has 830 horsepower and 0 to 60 is also 2.9 seconds. Now, why the big gap in horsepower but identical 0 to 60s? Most likely some weight.
Well, torque.
Torque, yeah, exactly.
It's all torque. When you press the accelerator on an electric vehicle, you get 100% torque immediately.
Mhm.
And on a gasoline or on an ICE vehicle, you don't get maximum torque until your RPMs get high enough.
You spool your RPMs, and within that 0 to 60 gap, or that you probably are adding rapidly in terms of the EV with all that torque. So the specs fundamentally, the 0 to 60 are identical. And then it says Tesla value kills Ferrari and Model 3 front looks better. This is, of course, their opinion. But look at the cost difference. We're looking at almost $350,000.
Yeah, I mean, I admit, I love the look of the Ferrari overall quite a bit better than the Model 3 in this case. But I would not trade looks for $350,000.
Yeah, good point.
Looks, the sound, the rumble of the 12-cylinder motor, all of the cool things on the Ferrari, they're very cool, but they're not $350,000 cool.
Yeah. And of course, we can't wait until Ferrari actually makes 100% BEV rather than dipping their toes with a hybrid like the LaFerrari.
It'll happen.
Mm-hmm. They're going to be forced to at some point. The ICE vehicles will no longer allow production of ICE type vehicles.
Yes. Hey, on Instagram, RD37 has joined us today. Thank you for joining. And he says, battery technology has to come around for drivers' time on the road. Graphene is changing the battery designs.
Yeah, we fiddled with graphene a couple years ago or so. Actually, we were commissioned to put graphene batteries into a Tesla Model S. And it turns out, because of the engineering changes necessary to achieve that goal, the plan was scrubbed. It was a financial decision.
Right.
But yeah, graphene is an interesting, radical new technology, and it will change, DC storage.
Right now, we talked about this a few months ago. Graphene's cost is the main barrier. Lithium ion or lithium is refined lithium is a couple $100s per kilo. Graphene is roughly 100, somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times more expensive. A couple $100,000, so I guess it's more like 1,000 times more expensive per kilo for graphene.
Mhm.
The performance on graphene is astounding. Where typical battery technology is advancing in energy density at a rate of about 30% per year, graphene technologies are advancing in energy density at about 50% per year. The curves on that cycle, where cost is coming down and density is going up, will eventually meet to where these graphene solid-state batteries will become economical. At that point in time, I could see a real revolution in battery technology.
And as we know that demand creates scaling, and as scaling occurs, innovation kicks in, and the costs begin to come down.
Yes, definitely.
So here's an interesting article. It starts with, now let this sink in. We're talking about Lucid now. Lucid has the longest range in EVs, 520 miles.
Mm-hmm.
It has the most efficient large sedan, 4.6 miles per kilowatt hour. It has the fastest charging EVs, 300-mile range in less than 22 minutes. It has the most aerodynamic production car, and that's according to C&D, Cars and Driver.
No, that's the coefficient of I'm trying to
it's
remember. It's their the wind tunnel coefficient, the drag coefficient.
Specification. Okay.
It's a specification that 0.197 makes it the most efficient four-door sedan.
Fascinating. Number 5, they say it's the quickest 0 to 60 sedan in 1.89 seconds.
True.
It is the quickest 0 to 100 sedan, 3.87 seconds. It's the fastest electric sedan, top speed now, which people usually don't talk about that much, but it's 205 miles per hour. It is the most power-dense drive units, 9 horsepower plus per kilogram. It has the most spacious interiors in its class, what they call the S-Class, or long wheelbase interior size in an E-Class footprint.
I did some looking up on these to revalidate them, and they're pretty much all true. The one I thought was most fascinating was the 300 miles of range in less than 22 minutes. That's achieved because Lucid has the ability to charge at 800 volts as well as the high amperage, so they can take advantage of the true 350 kilowatt chargers. And when your battery is large enough to have 520 miles of range, plus the efficiency, charging speeds start to slow down as your battery gets full. Well, you're only 60% full when you're at 300 miles. And so it's that sweet spot, that 20 to 80%, which is when charging speeds can be maximized, it covers more than 300 miles of charge. It's definitely true.
So I guess the point here is don't discount Lucid. It's even though the stock valuation, comparatively speaking, is low, very low, actually.
Yes.
And their cash burn is extremely high.
Yes.
There are other factors to consider. I think Jesse has a point here.
And this should be taken with a grain of salt because I am a Lucid investor, not investment advice. We heard Sandy say it a long time ago. They have the best drivetrain he's ever seen. And also, they have, as Elon would call it, the sugar daddy that's going to give them money forever. So I think they're going to be fine, and super supporter of Lucid. And all these, when I saw this checklist that you had, I was like, yeah, they're known for their tech. They have good tech, even though, they're struggling maybe business-wise in some people's eyes.
They do happen to be up 10% on their stock price today.
Really?
Ooh,
They're
nice.
$3.10. When I was researching for these articles for Lucid, I also came across an article from Inside EVs on March 2nd of this year. It was by Andre Nedelia, and he quotes Peter Rawlinson, who says, Peter Rawlinson noted that not far in the future, you're going to get 10 kilometers per kilowatt hour of battery. And then you get as a result, you get a 300 kilometer range, which is about 180 miles, on a 30 kilowatt battery. That's much smaller than today.
Yeah.
Then you can take and reduce the cost of your battery. We know that battery is about 25% of the overall cost of the car, from $20,000 to maybe $4,000. And that's another real game changer when you add in, of course, economies of scale as well. Something to think about. It definitely is. And Lucid, I think, of all of the EV makers, because of their superior tech, they are head and shoulders, actually, above almost all the competition when it comes to being able to leverage something like this.
Looks like we've got a bunch of people chiming in here. Jesse, is this still being populated? Or?
Yeah, this is a bunch of stuff from Instagram. I'm trying to... The guy's typing very fast on Instagram, and it's coming in a bunch of little chunks, so I'm putting it in one thing.
Okay. All right, we'll hold off then.
Well, but before we go on, I just saw Highlander was on,
Yes.
and
Okay.
we wanted to show you Highlander. Thank you very much for the picture. It looks like I have Ellie and Annie and um, oh, gee, I'm not reading that one right now.
Let me see.
Your three daughters have signed the picture for us. It says Happy 40th Anniversary.
HUD. Well, of course, this is a
Possibly
child scribble.
Hudson, I
Yeah,
think, is
yeah.
is
But let
who it
us know
is.
what their names are, and we'll give them some proper credit here. But yeah, thank you for joining us on this podcast and for sending us a picture of the submarine that you were on. Yeah, Highlander is an old submariner, and he's congratulating us on our 40 years at the Gruber Companies, which this Friday, by the way, will be a celebration.
Yes.
And the staff has actually bought a time capsule. And we're going to, have they dug the hole yet? Do you know?
I don't know if they've dug the hole yet. I'm thinking we might actually put one of our sunglass cases into the time capsule.
We should. It's appropriate, yes. So
I think that'd be very appropriate.
there will be, of course, be food and
Highlander
music. And
Highlander will be on the show with the ladies on Friday as well.
oh,
Oh,
that's true. It's
fantastic.
going to be on our podcast, yes. And anyway, it was the USS Norfolk, SSN 714. And there's even a mention here from, and I don't know what the titles are, but it says, to STS2/SS, keep up the good work. It's been a pleasure serving with you. And that was from well, I don't know the titles, but U.S. Navy, whatever it was.
Yeah. So Highlander, thank you for the picture, the kind words, the autographs of your daughters. And he says, of course, kindness is always free.
Mm-hmm. TikTok, Van Goatwagon has joined us. He says, we love their car designs, smart and good looking. Yeah, he's talking about Lucid. Instagram, RD Free7 says, this is cost atmosphere that is in the time curve. But lithium is presently the one being used because of source credentials. But graphene is the future, using garbage instead of digging up earth. Is Lucid American?
There's a few comments here, a couple of them questions. First, I believe Lucid is American, although they are owned a little over 60% right now by the Saudi Arabian PIF fund. Saudi ownership doesn't mean that they were not founded in America.
And the tech was developed here.
The tech was developed here. I agree with him, though. I think graphene is ultimately the future of batteries. There's some obstacles and cost to overcome, but his point of, it reminds me of Back to the Future, where they had the little Mr. Fusion thing on the back of the DeLorean, and Doc went to the garbage, shuffled through, found a banana peel, dumped it into Mr. Fusion, and there you go, you have energy.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be able to use garbage and extract the graphene from your garbage instead of having to mine lithium.
And it is the most plentiful element on Earth.
Yes, it sure is.
Sure.
Well, the one thing that, Pete, if you remember when we were doing the Model S and the Roadster battery, that company came to us. I think there was an issue with the energy density, though. So I would like to see how that's improved over the last several years since that happened, since we were talking about it.
Sure. Fair enough. RD Free says, thank you for allowing me to post. Well, absolutely. We love it when the audience chimes in and adds, subtracts, challenges. That's what it's all about. All right, have another headline here. Biden rumored to announce up to 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. And that's today, and I guess it happened.
It happened. I always like to read on the latest to catch up on what's going on with this. I saw the rumor, and then it was all over the press, several articles. About, I would say, 7 o'clock Eastern time this morning, the announcement came down. The tariffs that are going up, Chinese EVs are going from 25% to 100% tariff. The most notable electrics or hybrids, it's hybrids that are Chinese made as well, are the Polestar 2 and the Volvo S-Series hybrid, S90 hybrid. Because Geely, or Geely, whichever you want to pronounce it as, is a Chinese company. And those two vehicles that are currently in the U.S. market are impacted immediately on that. Other things that are going up, solar cells. So the solar panels that are Chinese made go up from a 25 to 50% tariff. Aluminum and steel that's Chinese made goes from a 7.5% tariff all the way up to 25% tariff. I thought the most interesting one for the EV market is that lithium ion battery cells for electric vehicles and for other applications is going to go from a 25% to 50% tariff, which that affects a lot of US EV manufacturers immediately.
It does. We'd like to hear from you. What do you think about this?
Well, hold on, I got a question, Mark. Was that, did you say and other uses? Is this only specific to EVs, or is this going to affect laptop batteries, toothbrushes, all that kind of stuff?
It will affect laptop batteries, toothbrushes, shavers, all
Anything
that kind of
with
stuff.
lithium ion, small consumer electronics.
Anything
That's
with
not
that,
good.
Yep, anything with that small consumer electronic lithium ion cell. The accusation the United States is making is that China is illegally, or it's hard to say that a nation's doing something illegal when nations are sovereign, but that China is choosing to subsidize the quote unquote green industry, so things like solar panels and electric vehicle battery cells. And they are doing so in a way that is anti-competitive and unfair, trying to put the rest of the world out of business so they can become the manufacturer for the world in these areas.
Interesting.
That's the accusation.
I mean, yeah, I personally, I think they are, but that's, I don't know. That's it's not good, because that means my iPhone, my laptop, all of that stuff's going to get much, much more expensive just so that we can call it competitive.
Even your Harbor Freight tools, they have batteries in them.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, any drills or any of that.
Not only the batteries, the fact that the Harbor Freight tools are made with aluminum or steel.
Yeah, good point.
The aluminum and steel goes up as well.
And now, Pete, I don't know if you wanted to mention, I don't know if we've gotten into the details on Solo, but we know that tariff was a big part of that whole issue too, where basically caused serious issues for that company. And now we're going to see that with Polestar and some of these other ones.
I've been running that through my mind while we were talking about this, because that was one of the issues with Solo, is that there was a tariff that was applied that made it basically unprofitable for them to continue. They started with a 22% profit margin or something like that, and then once the tariff hit, it was very thin. Well, with this, there's I can't see any way that they could sell that car at the price that they had, the MSRP.
I can't either. I honestly, what I see, more Mexican factories.
Tell us about that. What's the advantage there? I know, but let's do that for the audience.
Yeah, for the audience here. If China either gets their product into Mexico themselves, or they third-party source the product, maybe they own a lithium mine in Central Africa or in Chile in South America, rather than having that product that is partially refined go to China for final processing, if it were to go to Mexico for final processing, now it's under the North American Free Trade Agreement, so it would be immune from any tariffs, especially if it's a Chinese-owned company, but the raw materials coming from outside of China, going to a place outside of China, getting manufactured outside of China. It's not China.
What we're really doing now is encouraging China to expand into areas like the NAFTA trade zones.
Like the NAFTA trade zones. Mexico is a hot spot for them. They want to expand there, even if the United States puts up barriers, which is going to run afoul of some of these other trade agreements. But even if the U.S. puts barriers up for these Chinese-owned companies, they said, the Chinese have said, you know what, that's fine. There's a huge market in Central and South America and in Mexico that we can also address. And building factories in Mexico where there's already talent and infrastructure there makes a ton of sense to us.
Sure. TikTok, James Hill is chiming in. He says, I thought Biden wanted to go green. I guess not if regular people can't afford EVs. You know, I find it interesting that life is a series of upsides and downsides.
Yeah.
You kind of have to pick the ones.
So this is an anti, Chinese policy. If we really boil it down to simplistic terms, do you think he's doing this to win some kind of a vote for the upcoming
Oh, absolutely.
election?
Feels
I mean,
like he's trying to win that
trying to-
that middle crowd.
Yeah, trying to pander to some people.
This is an election year.
This is an election year. Joe Biden wants to show that he's tough on China to help assuage the people who are in the car manufacturing industry, especially the EV manufacturing industry. And having a tough on China policy is politically expedient. You get political capital from that. You don't give it up, even if it's at the expense of going green. Which, by the way, let's say that the BYD Seagull, with its sodium-ion battery and 130 miles or so of range, makes its way over to the United States. Even with a 100% tariff, the BYD Seagull would be $26,000, which is cheaper than all but the very lowest end EVs that are out there today. In fact, I think it's cheaper than anything that's being manufactured as of right now, even with a 100% tariff.
So this may backfire anyway.
It might not be enough if Biden is really interested in making sure China stays off our shores.
It does feel like that this should have happened like a year or two ago, and it feels like it's strategic to now because we're entering in a few months into some hard, campaigning and political debates. It's kind of like if you were going to do this tariff, why didn't you do this? 12 months to 18 months ago. I can understand not right off the bat because it might have been too much for our economy, but it just felt like this should have been done a year ago,
It's a good point. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, we need him next to eradicate the 7 to 8% interest on housing, because I want that to go down. That usually happens during election years as well, but he hasn't done anything like that yet.
So on a different note here, Ferrari is back in the news. 2 patent filings hint at how Ferrari is planning to make up for the lack of engine noises in their future electric cars. We've been debating this for a long time, that the exotic car crowd, part of the experience is the sound of the vehicles.
Yes.
It's crystal clear. So how will these exotic, especially the Italian exotic car manufacturers, keep that auditory sense alive in the vehicles that they're going to make? The styling is there. We don't doubt that for a moment. The engineering, they're not great at EVs yet. It'll take them some time.
They'll get there.
They make exquisite 12-cylinder engines,
Yeah, they'll get there.
Yeah, they'll get there. But the sound. So we've got a picture, I think, that we can throw up here. No, Jesse, I didn't put it up there. Never mind. So it says, first spotted by CarBuzz. 1 patent application published by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, March 21st, and it was filed by Ferrari for a triple motor EV with sound generators, plus inlets positioned near each of the motors and outlets that would allow the sound to be piped into the cabin. Now, why would you want sound in the cabin?
One reason you might want sound in the cabin, if for all of us who have driven ICE cars in the past, you don't realize it when you have an electric vehicle, but the sound of the engine is different at 40 versus 60 versus 80 miles an hour. You get a sense of how fast you're going. You get a sense of how your car is performing. If there's something slightly off with the engine, you hear it with the sound. I'm here to tell you, I raise my hand. I do not have a different sound in my Tesla when I'm going 60 versus when I'm going 80 miles an hour. And that's a problem sometimes.
Mm-hmm. The other fundamental reason in a performance car, performance vehicle period, is your shift points. When you're racing, for example, you don't have time to look at your gauges, to look at your RPMs on your tachometer. You're dealing with sound. You become familiar with the
Sure.
RPM sound, and that is your cue to shift. So what they say is this isn't just about creating noise for added drama. Just as drivers of internal combustion cars use the sound of an engine revving as a cue for acceleration and speed, This method would give drivers a better idea of what the car is doing at a given moment. A second patent, apparently, that was filed by Ferrari deals with a different method of sound generation. In this case, air flowing over the car would be channeled into resonators to produce a sound.
I think that's brilliant, personally.
I'm thinking maybe a giant kazoo. Is that what we're talking about here?
That kind of is, yeah.
And so it would be channeled. Air could then be drawn through the grill or even intake under the car. So they have a patent for that as well. They say that that some of the other automakers currently use different sounds as a substitute for exhaust notes in EVs, but these sounds are usually generated artificially and played through speakers. Now the jury's out on this one. Can the sound through an amplifier and speakers become so indistinguishable from a real combustion engine that it would be convincing enough for people that race cars? And I'm still saying that would be very difficult.
I don't know about that.
We're not just talking about audible sound. We're talking about vibration. We're talking about harmonics. We're talking about a whole host of additional components in that sound.
Well, Keith Pixguy has a great comment on Instagram. Thank you for joining us, by the way. He says, EVs don't need sound. The motor whine gets louder with speed, especially the dual motor and multi-motor vehicles.
Good point. The Tesla Roadsters that I test drive, they have a characteristic whine sound based on the RPMs.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was very popular over 10 years ago. People in the movie industry actually use that sound for various, like the Bat cycle, for example.
Oh, okay.
So they talk about Ferrari here. They continue. They say they also previously filed a patent application for an in-wheel electric motor, which would be a bit more unusual, they say. Chinese automaker Dongfeng is the only automaker so far to claim homologation of an in-wheel motor for passenger cars. The Fengshan E70 sedan and then the Lordstown endurance pickup truck also used in-wheel motors, but that was aimed at commercial fleets. Only a handful were built before the company declared bankruptcy. The jury's really still out on the effectiveness of in-wheel motors for a number of reasons: the technology, the unsprung weight issue, and although it seems like a very elegant design when you think about it, because why have all of that transitioning, coupling, and half shafts and CV joints, drive shafts, when you can make the wheel itself a rotating mass?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Why don't you describe for the audience the unsprung weight issue? We haven't done that in a long time. What is unsprung weight and why is it an issue?
Well, with a vehicle, you have suspension components, and typically the wheels are much lighter than the rest of the car body, which is now supported by suspension. When you start putting in-wheel motors in, you're moving that weight into the wheels themselves, and now it becomes more difficult to create a smooth ride. Picture hitting a pothole with a suspension system that can absorb that shock versus a motor that weighs a few hundred pounds hitting that and then giving you a jolt.
Sure, that makes total sense because the amount of kinetic energy that's being generated and put into your suspension is going to be a multitude or magnitudes greater based on the heavier weight in the wheels. Okay.
Instagram, RD37 says, this is all very cool. Thank you. Oh, he likes sunglasses too. We have a sunglasses emoji.
Yes.
I've noticed that Elon is beginning to wear sunglasses.
I have seen that sometimes too.
He was up on stage. He had a big black cowboy hat and he had really cool dark shades. I think he's watching our podcasts.
I think he is too.
Thank you for joining us, Elon. Feel free to chime in at any time. We'd love to hear from the genesis of EVs. All right, here's another article. Lucid Motors plans to release a $48,000 mid-size EV rivaling the Tesla Model S. And
Model Y, though.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Model Y. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, Model Y. Lucid Motors is set to introduce this new midsize vehicle priced at approximately 48K to for to provide direct competition with the Y long range, according to Peter Rawlinson, and known as Project Midsize. This model is slated to enter production in late 2026 and expected to resemble a crossover SUV. Of course, Lucid's focus on expanding its current product line is also evident with the imminent launch of the Gravity SUV slated for later this year, by the way, which is good news. I
hmm
thought it was next year, early next year.
Yeah, it's slated for ideally they're hoping to announce as they announce their third quarter results the actual date and then have the release of the Gravity take place in a release event somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas time.
And we do believe that the stock will go up prior to that.
I do think so, especially if they go and do what the EV makers like to do, announce pre-orders, have the release on time. They're probably going to submit it. If it were to win a Motor Trend Car of the Year or SUV of the Year type of award like the Lucid Air did, that would give them a big boost. There's lots of good things to happen to Lucid if they can make these dates.
Very cool. So, another article that caught us by surprise. Turns out BMW plans to roll out hydrogen-powered cars by 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thought there. Oh, by the way, on the Lucid,
Yeah.
the rumor is it's going to be called the Lucid Earth.
Oh, yeah, I did read that somewhere.
The name Lucid Earth has been trademarked, but we don't know for sure. But yeah, on this BMW, oh man,
They say hydrogen cars are similar to EVs, but come with a cool feature called hydrogen fuel cells, which releases only water vapor. So it's definitely environmentally friendly. So far, the United States has seen about 2.5 million EVs hit the roads. Although in Phoenix, it seems like it's more than that. My wife and I are still counting when we're driving, and it's difficult to not see a Model S at every intersection.
Yeah.
You notice that?
I have noticed that. I was counting EVs at the grocery store this last weekend, and actually got to where I was counting the number of EVs in a row that I would see before I saw an ICE vehicle. And we were up 5, 6, 7,
Really?
and then an ICE vehicle would come through, and then you get another 4 or 5 EVs. They're just, it's like they're everywhere now.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm really happy with that.
We're gonna be in for a big shock next month or next within a week and a half now.
Yeah.
Tesla takeover, by the way, we should probably plug that here, in Europe is taking place May 25th and 26th, Saturday and Sunday, in Flachau, Austria. It's going to be a cool event. 1,000 EVs will be there. My reason for bringing that up, aside from the fact that I needed to plug it in this podcast, is Europe just doesn't have the concentration of electric vehicles. We're going to be hard-pressed to see a Tesla there, other than at Flachau, at the Tesla
Wow.
takeover. So anyway, continuing with this though, so 2.5 million EVs hit the roads in the U.S., they claim, but as of mid-2022, only around 15,000 hydrogen cars were cruising around, and they're all in California. No
Yeah.
surprise there.
No surprise there.
So the focus, they say, in this new era of transportation, for BMW at least, will be hydrogen. Quick refueling and eco-friendly options, they say. Only a handful of manufacturers, though, they add, are actively developing this technology, leading the way for BMW to be one of the primary ones. And this is according to the BMW CEO, Oliver Zipse, who says hydrogen engines are set to play a significant role in various parts of the world.
I like the concept of the hydrogen fuel cell. In theory, it's they bring oxygen out of the air, mix it with a hydrogen fuel. The electrolysis that takes place generates electricity, and the output is distilled water. Wonderful. It's a great theory. The problem is hydrogen fuel cell technology has been around longer than the modern electric vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Why hasn't it taken off yet?
It's the beta VHS, tape syndrome, in my opinion. Looks like we're getting a signal to wrap things up. One thing that we wanted to quickly cover is the craziness that's happening around the Gigafactory in Berlin.
Yes.
We've got some Germans that are lighting up again about the expansion, going from 500,000 cars per year to 1 million cars per year. And we'll report on that in the next podcast as well. But at this point, at least, there seems to be some civil unrest. And if it continues, we are going to do another video like we did the first time when we advised the Germans, don't dilly-dally with this, all of these regulations. You need to get that factory up and running quickly. We need to get fossil fuel burners off the roads, and you need to stop being German.
Yeah, we need to also get the environmental activists to understand that they're attacking the most environmentally friendly auto manufacturer in history.
Right. Anyway, we're going to wrap at this point. Thank you for joining us. Within 6 minutes, we're going to be live again with the Tesla Roadster podcast. Have a lot of things to cover there. We're going to get technical. We're going to talk about things inside the Roadster that are failing. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.